Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. If you're listening to this, he has returned. He has risen. My friend Joe Green is back on the show. He's been on to talk about JFK, RFK, Jonestown, RFK again, JFK again, and Jonestown again. And then maybe a little bit about Harvey Milk. And the fun details about that. But everybody, please give a warm welcome to Joe Green. And this isn't live, so there's just me here. I'll clap for you. Joe, please introduce yourself.
Hey Robbie, how you doing, man? I'm Joe Green. I'm a researcher. My last book was called Tinfoil Hat Not Required. And I guess I should mention quickly that I had a stroke. Actually, I had multiple strokes, which is why I've been kind of out of commission for the last few months. And anyway, I'm on the road to recovery. So we'll see. I don't know. I can't see very well. I don't walk great, and my fingers don't type very well either. So I'm kind of a mess, but I'm here.
If you wouldn't have told me that, I wouldn't have guessed that because you look great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I
I mean,
appreciate that.
I'm over here bumming it with the refusing to get a haircut because
You got the
society.
hair?
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
I'm usually wearing a hat. People are always surprised when it's this long. That's why I wear the hat. But I'm happy that you're okay and that you're at least on the road to recovery. That's important. When I found out about that you had it, that was a big shocker. Again, you don't expect these things to happen. They kind of do. I'm happy you're here, and I'm happy we're going to be able to talk about some things because I know you were willing to discuss some things about. I think it was MLK we decided first because I hadn't talked about that yet. But right now, I've been really discussing the JFK stuff and looking into the Vietnam War a little bit more. And I think you've seen some of my clips I've been doing. And I kind of wanted to let you kind of discuss what you might want to talk about first, or we can just hop right into what I was hoping we kind of talk about.
I just have one. I wanted to mention, all this health stuff. Um, I did want to give a quick shout out for Dan Storper. I don't know if you ever met Dan.
I haven't met him. I heard of him though.
He was a real good friend of mine, and he just died of pancreatic cancer. It was a real shock. Um, he just called me one day and said, "I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer." I'm like, Jesus Christ. Um, Dan and I have been friends for years now. He'd been coming down to San Antonio, and he'd pick my brain about different things because he's working on a book. And he had done some work, as a matter of fact, on the MLK case. Found another witness, and anyway, he's a great guy. He's very well known in kind of the background. A lot of researchers know who he is, and anyway, good luck, Dan. He's passed on.
I think it's important that we kind of discuss. There's a lot of researchers and people that have done a lot of good work, whether it's with the MLK case, JFK case, RFK case, that are no longer with us to be able to see kind of the end turnover of a lot of this work and things that have been uncovered. I mean, I just spoke to Rosie Greer like a month ago, not on the show or anything, but through email. I found out his directory thing and his phone number and all that, and called, never got an answer. Then I emailed and he just sent me like a really heartfelt response back and was like, I'm very old and it's not easy for me to be able to speak and all these types. I'm like, dude, let me just like, I'll take the 6 hours and sit with you and cut it down to however short you want it. But I think for the historical record, a lot of people talk about why does the case matter, the JFK case, why does the RFK case matter, why does the MLK case matter? Well, it's history, and it's important that we try and get the most accurate representation of it as possible. And as we've learned 60 years on with the JFK case and 50 something years on with the RFK case, and then however long with the MLK case, you kind of notice that the record that was originally stated, the official narrative, is not necessarily the truth, but it is yet what we're teaching to people. And I think through many discussions, covered a lot of these aspects of things. But I guess what's been the most important revelation for you about understanding history and not needing a tinfoil hat to do so?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that all information is essentially equal in the sense that it's important not to have a bias in one direction or another. But I'm not talking about left wing or right wing bias. What I mean is the state versus what you individually uncover, because the state always has its point of view. The state is always going to want to cover up its own crimes. It's not going to want to tell you about Guatemala in 55 and things like that. Um, that's always going to be the case. So it's important to just keep a measured sort of look at all of the information instead of just accepting whatever the people on TV tell you is the truth. Because frequently it's not. Yeah.
I mean, we have Walter Cronkite's the biggest example of someone who went on air and told people that the Warren Commission was able to prove that Lee Harvey Oswald shot from the Texas School Book Depository building because they were able to identify the rifle as being Lee Harvey Oswald's. They have fingerprint matches. They have all these types of matches, and Oswald fit the total characteristics of being a lone nut assassin. Well, we know that's not true at all, and that his wife was the source for identifying the rifle, and she couldn't positively identify it to the HSCA because she didn't know the difference between a rifle and a shotgun. So again, things change. History is kind of this one-way thing, and then with Watergate, for instance, you learn it's a whole other scenario that's going on. I wanted to focus a lot of this discussion on things that we have possibly heard, or me and you have talked about on our very first episode, and other things that get mentioned throughout the JFK case. Just finding where you heard it, what would you think about it, and maybe some things that I could show you or something. Because I'm trying to we hear these things all the time. Let me give you the best example, and we'll get into the Texas stuff, the elite figures that have these crazy characteristics that are definitely like, I don't think all these theories are nonsensical. Like LBJ, Vietnam, Kennedy was killed because of the Vietnam War had to happen. I see that pop up so much. Now, there's evidence for it. I'm not saying that it's not true. I just don't think that was the original reason. I think there was multifactorial stuff going on with JFK. But with LBJ, I mean, you have figures involved like Richard Russell stating that what General Taylor did with coups and all these types of things happening in Vietnam was impressive, and that how he would like to see more of that, and he thought it was an effective way of getting things done. These are people that are giving interviews about killing people or getting rid of individuals that don't fit their narratives so they can better function and better have a better relationship or whatever goal they're intended to in another country. Again, these are people that I think, a lot of these weights and theories, there is some realization to it, but I think we have to kind of stick by like at least what we can back up with things. It's kind of like saying LBJ did it. I don't think LBJ did it. I definitely think he covered it up. But again, the JFK one's so complex.
Yeah, I mean that's an important thing to hold on to is that everything is this complex. And the type of attitude that you're talking about, Richard Russell, talking about how great it was what we were doing in Vietnam. DoD people were saying these kinds of things throughout. So there's a through line that this is an attitude that is taken up by the Pentagon. During World War II, the New York Times wrote an op-ed by a DoD person, I can't remember his name, where he said, as far as we are concerned, there are no civilians in Japan. So they're just flat out saying we're going to kill Japanese people. We don't care if they're in the army or not, which of course leads up to the fact that we ended up dropping atomic bombs on them. So this mentality is what you were trying to expose that lies behind the assassination. The assassination becomes one of the many tools that are used by these folks to get their way, period.
And I want to ask your opinion on LBJ. Sticking to kind of like the theories of LBJ being behind the assassination. I think we've talked many a times about different conversations about Texas people, and I asked you if you were from Texas because I wanted to get your kind of your perspective from a Texas perspective. You responded with "Yeehaw." I'm going to have Rich on here at some point to be able to discuss more about John Connelly and others. Um, but there's these things that I've heard about the assassination, like the very first time learning about it, the argument at Love Field, which we can talk about. But I want to get your opinion on LBJ because, listening to his phone calls and things like that, I don't think he was behind the assassination. I definitely think he benefited from it for sure. I think a lot of people did. But I think we talk about like different theories and stuff behind it. Can you maybe just explain to me your picture of LBJ from what you've learned and kind of, I don't know, what maybe have changed for you from, I guess, your opinion on or difference of opinion, or if you agree with some of the theories of his involvement?
Yeah. I think it's good to actually I can have this opportunity to clarify that a little bit because I think a lot of people in the research community who think about my relationship with LBJ as I'm the guy who says that LBJ didn't do it. But the only reason that I have written that is because I think he didn't do it in the sense that LBJ is not the mastermind. I mean, in other words, LBJ is not running the operation. Like, I think that's ridiculous. That does not mean that he is not guilty of being complicit in the murder. You know, back in LBJ's kind of career really starts in 48, in 1948. He ran against Coke Stevenson in Texas. Coke Stevenson had, I think, won something like 12. He had participated in 12 elections and won 12 elections. He's a very popular conservative candidate. And at that time, LBJ was known as a Roosevelt liberal. But LBJ was actually against civil rights in 48 because it was he talked about the Harry Truman Civil Rights Bill, which Johnson said, "Oh, this is terrible." And he won that election in 48 largely because he had this idea that maybe the Air Force could fly him to different places in a plane because this was new. Like this was not in 1948 people weren't flying every day. It wasn't like it is today. But he ended up using a helicopter. And so he went to all these different places in Texas in a helicopter. And in fact, he ran it because I mean landing a helicopter in a town is kind of dangerous. And they almost did hit like wires and a school building at one point. Anyway, but he used the helicopter to get to different places. And the helicopter he was riding in was a Bell 47D, the same Bell helicopter that would then benefit from the Vietnam War and is mentioned in the Kennedy assassination as one of the beneficiaries. The helicopter would have lost a lot of money if Kennedy had stayed the president. So Johnson has this long-standing relationship with Bell Helicopter, and in fact, the places he was flying to, he brought his top aide with him, a guy named John Connelly. So these are all names that are going to appear later on in the assassination. So it is kind of interesting to see these alliances form. And this is not to say again that Johnson is, masterminding the assassination in any way, but the people who did mastermind the assassination knew damn well that Johnson would be on their team because Johnson had been on their team for a long time.
Again, I think like the whole Mac Wallace stuff and LBJ having some people killed for his own nefarious game, I think there's evidence to support that. So I understand people's opinion on the JFK thing. I just, I think when like you look at LBJ's phone calls, he mentions Harold Bird in a couple of his phone conversations with individuals. But I've just kind of tried to have a more balanced perspective on LBJ. I do think, I mean, even with why do you think he got the civil rights stuff passed? I mean, he did push a lot of that through.
He did, and he was a Roosevelt liberal in a lot of ways. And there's the dichotomy, right? In the evolution of Johnson's views on civil rights goes from 48 to 63, and 64 is when he eventually gets that bill passed. And it's largely said, well, that was really Kennedy's bill. I mean, yes, but Johnson believed in it too. Johnson wanted to be known as the new Roosevelt, and he believed in all of these different programs that he got instituted. So, people are complicated. He can think one thing on certain issues and think another way on different other issues, and that's exactly what was happening with Johnson during that period. Um, the uh, oh shit, what was I going to say? There's another real good tangent I have here, and I just forgot what it is. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, even with all people, there's their goods and their bads. I kind of, with LBJ, I've just kind of taken him as more of a someone, and I think the best representation of it was John McCone stating what LBJ was Well, LBJ wasn't a good president, but he was a great politician. LBJ as president, I feel like thought that he was going to be focused more with domestic issues and things that happen to deal with the press. Most of his early 63 conversations are dealing about the press. A lot of it does involve the Kennedy assassination, but a lot of slam articles and things that he's worried about. I think that's what he thought his presidency was going to be largely focused on, and then doing other things to pass a bill here and pass a bill there. One thing I do not like LBJ for was that he did use JFK's death as ways to get people onto his administration. Larry O'Brien, for instance, was one. Dean Rusk, all these individuals. And there's a lot of names that people always usually bring up when it comes to JFK's close friends that I think you got to look at phone calls with LBJ, because the only person I've ever seen that stayed to the line of not really giving Johnson much was Larry O'Brien in the beginning. He eventually went on to the side of LBJ where he was a lot more conversational. But the first couple phone calls they had after JFK's death, he's very short and very quick. Like, LBJ says a long thing, trying to be his funny Texasness that he has. And then Larry O'Brien's like, "Do you need something from me? Like, what's the point here?" But then Dean Rusk became very close with LBJ. Ted Sorensen, like, there was a trying of that, but Sorensen left because Kennedy died and he was writing a book. But Johnson's like, "Okay, I get it. Let me talk to someone I know in Hollywood studios that might be able to turn this into a book and give you some more work to have afterwards because I care about you so much." And there was a lot of things, and I think it was brought up with Malcolm Kilduff, who said he didn't see it at the time, but he thought everybody else did, where that Johnson felt he was always being compared to Kennedy. And again, these are things that I think, I don't know, to me, they're just interesting tidbits and factors that I think make you look at Johnson a little bit differently. I mean, he obviously was opposite from JFK in a lot of stances, and I'm sure they had their disputes at times, but trying to find the realism, because I'm always hearing this LBJ did it thing, and I'm like, what's your evidence? They're like, he did this and this happened, and he was trying to get Connelly out of the car at Love Field because he didn't want him to be in the firing way. I'm like, I don't think that sounds, why would he leave Nellie? John Connolly's not going to leave his wife. So again, if you disagree, that's fine. But one example we can kind of go into out of the things I mentioned, if you want to pick one, but the argument at Love Field.
Yeah, actually, I just remembered what I was going to
Oh, go
say
ahead.
is yeah, is as a sort of going to this dichotomy question. One of the things that Trump just got rid of is the Job Corps program, which in my head,
Is
I
that the
kind of
NSAID thing?
no, no, it's not the NSAID. A Job Corps is like a thing for like troubled kids. Like if you have a teenager or something that's having trouble in school, and my stepson went through Job Corps and it was great. And in my head, I think, well, that's a Kennedy program. It was not a Kennedy program, which duh, I mean, they built the first one in Texas. It's a Johnson program. And actually, the Job Corps is a great program, and it's really stupid that Trump got rid of it. But it means that those kids who are troubled pretty much have no options other than to join the army, which is, good for the army, I guess. I don't know if that's actually the reasoning behind it, but I do think I mean, as hateable as Johnson was, and he is, and he was a piece of shit, but he also was a very good politician. And he also got some good stuff through the government. I mean, what are you going to do?
Again, I think one of the most important things I've always held about Johnson was I liked him because I only thought he was the only one that could have got rid of Hoover. Sadly, they were friends and neighbors for 30 something years, but I think his famous quote is, "I'd rather have Hoover inside my tent pissing out than outside my tent pissing in." And again, looking through a lot of this stuff, you hear so much about him showing his Johnson to people, and so much that gets rumored out there. Where I was trying to find the realism and trying to find out who LBJ was. Now, look, you can tell when he's lying. You can tell when he's doing something, or he doesn't really have a lot of reason to lie. I mean, he knows he's being recorded, sure, but he also can choose if he doesn't want these tapes to be released until 100 years after the fact, which I'm pretty sure everybody was on board with. So there's not a whole point. I think one thing that I've kind of looked into this on, which was the commission. we've all heard the famous phone call with J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ talking about a commission, a blue ribbon committee needs to be created. I didn't know that wasn't the first call about that. Not just with Hoover, but his name's Joe Alsop on 11/25, 1963 was talking about it to Johnson, and Johnson was refusing to do it because he just said he wanted it to all be on Hoover to do the work. Again, I mean, have you heard that before? Because that was relatively new to
Yes.
me.
And so, but so once Johnson was convinced, he did not want a commission at first. He wants, I think in his mind, he just wants it to all go away. He's just like, I'm the president now, and Kennedy, we're not going to worry about that. But that's obviously not going to work. So once he's convinced that they have to do something, then Johnson really takes charge and he does build the commission. I mean, it's often been said that the Warren Commission was really the Johnson Commission, and there's some truth to that. I mean, he was a big player in terms of getting people onto the Warren Commission. So, but I think that there's a period where he's thinking, I'm not going to have to do this, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to think about this. And then he decides, okay, I am going to have to do this, and then he really once he decides this is going to happen, I better be involved. And that's his approach after that.
I will have clips to back up what we talk about, but I'll do this at the end so I'm not interjecting every time with them. But him denying the commission and doing that, I think that really kind of he had to accept it, not on the coaxing of other people. I'm sure it was that as well too. But I also think it's because people were mentioning a commission of their own, like the House was doing it, the Senate was doing it, and then now he's going to have a rash of investigations happening, and this became a problem, and this is something he needed to, kind of squelch in a little bit. I mean, it was something he was being forced into just because he wanted everything. I mean, even we know the Warren Commission was just going to reiterate the FBI report. It was going to look at the stuff that they were collected, but eventually everyone was just going to side with what the Warren Commission said, and they include the doubts. They included the doubts just like the HSCA did of certain things. I think a lot of people doubted the magic bullet theory. I think in private conversations that we've heard, whether it's from a source or whether it's just through the community, that LBJ always thought it was a Cuban thing or something of that sort. I think that gets mentioned all the time. I mean, what are your thoughts on the whole structure of the commission and how would you describe it to someone who was new to the assassination?
I mean, the problem is that the government has one story that it has to tell. And the individual people who are inside the commission that are making the report, the ones that think about it, and in fact, there were some dissenters, in the commission. There were guys, Hale Boggs, for example, is like, this dog won't hunt. This is a bunch of nonsense. Um, but they also have to like, you get some of their private thoughts in some of these private conversations that you're thinking of, that you're talking about. But they have a problem because the government has to say, Oswald did it with the rifle, these things that happen, and none of this makes any sense at all. And that's what's revealed when you read the Warren Commission volumes, because all that stuff is in there. It's just completely out of order, and it's a big old mess and with a lot of irrelevant information. So that was the way to sort of disguise it. But I do want to say that, like, for people out there who are just like, man, the government just lies to us all the time. I mean, that's true, but actually, we're able to get the truth because of these different investigations that are held. I mean, the HSCA was terrific as far as putting out new information. And one thing, of course, that everybody ignores is that the HSCA is the last investigation officially of the Kennedy assassination by the US government, which concluded that there was a conspiracy. And that is never mentioned on any, TV show or anything that you would ever bring up. They just ignore that and they say, well, the Warren Commission said this. Um, but the fact that we're able to get these different investigations, even if they ultimately do end up with a bunch of lies, if you look at the material, you can find the truth. The truth is out there, as the X-Files used to say. It's just hard to get to. It's a lot of work. but it's good that we put pressure on our government to do these investigations, even for that reason.
Well, I mean, how much stuff did you have to relearn over again about the case that might have been wrong in the beginning because
Oh
of,
God, everything.
yeah, but there
I
was,
was just, oh, go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
going to say, I've heard things from people's books and people mention things from people's books that leave comments about, like, we know it was this because this and this and that. I'm like, you got that from this book. I'm not going to say the name because we both know the author. And I'm like, it's not real. It's not. It's a fictitious thing. It's a fantasy version. It's the one thing that coming at this, like, I'm not political at all. I would call myself an independent, if anything. I just don't care about modern day politics. But I'm also not a Kennedy fanboy, and I'm also not like an anybody fanboy. I just kind of want to know the factual thing. And so far, I'm just kind of looking at people as just people with goods and bad sides. I mean, it's hard to do. I've had Hoover historians on here where I'm like, COINTELPRO, all these horrible things. And they're just kind of like, what's the context? Like, you start explaining it in a different way about his life and stuff. And I'm just like sitting there like, it's new for me to hear that. But then you got to look at it from someone that all they do is read good things about Hoover. So it's like, I understand, I guess, but it's kind of taking all this information and putting it into something that would be more balanced and fact based. I'm not good at that. I'm trying my hardest right now. But I think this discussion, we should largely talk about this, much like a lot of the things we've kind of talked about here. But one name I could mention, Richard Russell. Everyone uses him as the guy of the main dissenter of the Warren Commission who did not want to serve on that thing and told LBJ he didn't want to serve. And then LBJ said, look, I don't want to have to stick the FBI on you, but you're goddamn going to serve. Now, Richard Russell is the one stating that we need to be supplying more troops to Vietnam, saying that we need to be getting people that haven't served at all. How is it that a guy who's never served in a war is sitting in a class next to a high school person who served in multiple wars? Doesn't make sense. He believes in equal opportunity, is what he stated. So again, these are things where he's talking about here's the pricing on how much we're spending in Vietnam a day. Here's what we're probably going to have at the end of 20 or 66 when the interview was in 64. So again, these are things where that guy's the dissenter. I can't really be a fanboy of him. It's much like with Thomas Noguchi. I love him for the RFK autopsy, but then he was so addicted to fame, he totally butchered the Natalie Wood one and made it a giant stunning star, gets drunk and falls off boat and drowns. That's not what it was at all. But each person, like you mentioned, has a good and a bad side. So I'm curious for you, what is your opinion on that? But also, what's your opinion on just things you had to relearn?
I mean, it's when I first got started looking into this stuff, it's because of John Judge, and he like rewrote all of history. And I almost like want to put everything in this conversation that we had that was like 3 hours long because it taught me to look at history in a completely different way than I had been like up until that point. And I realized, oh shit, of course. And I think one thing to kind of focus on is what you're getting to is that these are all humans. Like history is run by humans, and humans do contradictory things. They think contradictory things. They act on a on this idea at this juncture, and then 5 years later they act in a completely different way for a completely different juncture. And it's just because we're dealing with humans, and it's I try not to think about it in terms of good and bad exactly. It's just that humans are going to human. They're going to do these things, and some people are more dedicated to grander vistas like Kennedy was, but Kennedy also had his flaws. He slept around on Jackie and all these kinds of things that are problematic as far as Kennedy is concerned. But it's not. I don't worry about that as much because that has less to do with all of us. The assassination changed everybody's lives in the United States. In fact, almost every bad thing that has happened, in the last 60 years can be traced to that moment, to the moment that Kennedy was shot and the moment that justice was not obtained for Kennedy. Because the government went crazy after that, assassinating its own citizens. And once they knew they could get away with it, they just kept doing it. And we've got the current government, the current situation is in large part a um, it came from the Kennedy assassination, you know.
I think a lot of people, and I've seen comments kind of comment, is 60 years later, why does it matter? Why are we still talking about this? And it's kind of like there's Minecraft videos you can watch on fucking YouTube. So I don't want to hear anybody complain about me putting up historical context or things that people said. Again, not my opinion in these clips. These are just what people said when they said them. And then we can look at it like that. But I think it's also about kind of keeping history alive and understanding it more. One thing I kind of want to ask your opinion on, why do you think Jackie was jumping to the back of the car through the motorcade? We all know the official, or what I think everyone is widely accepted, was that she was reaching on the back of the car to grab brain matter of her husband. That sounds like what you believe, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think so. Well, because you have to remember she's in complete shock. And so she just turns and she just grabs, the part of her husband. Like she's just trying to help her husband. It doesn't make any real sense. Like why, that's
You're in
obviously
shock,
not going to work. But she's in shock. Yeah.
but
Yeah. And I think she would normally never jump on the back of a moving car, except that again, she's in shock.
well, again, this is where things have been inflated with theories where someone mentioned something like she's trying to escape the car because the driver had turned around. Again, this is something that gets added and it probably gets more popularized than a lot of things. And I think we can all tell that, there was an AI video that recreated the driver turning around and shooting off JFK's. I don't know if you've seen that. Um, it's basically an HD. So it goes from a film of the Zapruder film and then it adds the rest of it, but it's smooth and it's clear and it's like HD. I'm like, first of all, it's a film originally. So it goes up and down. So when you see the transition switch to an HD camera, that's AI adding the ending part to it. But a lot of people bring up Jackie jumping out of the car to get out, and Clint Hill had pushed her back in, and the Secret Service, that's how you know they were culpable of it. I don't believe that. I think the two theories, or the two I've heard that I actually kind of think could be possibilities, is the brain piece, because we know at Parkland Hospital, she walked up to a doctor with her hands cuffed like this, handed her a piece of brain. The doctor goes, "Thank you," then immediately turns to the wastebasket and puts it in there because there's nothing he can do with it. And then also, Malcolm Kilduff gave an interview where he states that he spoke to Clint Hill, and Clint Hill had said that she was reaching back to pull Clint Hill back into the car. Now, if I watch the Zapruder film and I think of it like that, it does make a little bit sense of Clint Hill jumping on the back and her grabbing, trying to, because the car's about to start moving really fast. I mean, to me, that seems plausible too, over the whole trying to get out of the car.
Yeah, she's not trying to get on. That whole the driver's shot, that's Bill Cooper's nonsense. This all comes from Bill Cooper because Cooper used to go to these he used to have meetings, groups that would come to see him speak, and he would show like the worst possible super grainy version of the assassination, and he'd say, "Look, that little smudge, is Greer should, it's a bunch of nonsense. Greer is culpable because he stopped the car, but he did not turn around and shoot Kennedy in the head. That's all that shit is nonsense. And the Secret Service guy who supposedly shot
George
Kennedy,
Hickey.
all that, yeah, that's all a bunch of nonsense too.
You know what? I will rethink that one. Not that I think it was possible, but I've heard LBJ in two phone calls state that all these damn Secret Service men lined up like little tin soldiers bound to fall over or knock each other over and a gun about to go off and get me killed. I've heard him say that two times in different phone calls through like different years. And I'm kind of like sitting there thinking, I'm like, why the fuck would you say something like that? Like, how do you even, he must have saw somebody put out a theory or something. But did you know LBJ was almost shot by a Secret Service agent that day or that weekend?
Was it almost shot by a Secret Service? No, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I looked it up because with the theory, I was trying to learn more about that Bill Cooper guy to figure it out. Yeah, he was apparently walking at night out of a hotel or something like that, and a Secret Service agent couldn't tell it was LBJ, and LBJ had actually talked about it in a press conference as well too. Which again, I'm not saying that means it could be possible. I'm just saying that's like something where it's like there is bit of that. It's much like with the Secret Service agent that was apparently shot and killed in Dealey Plaza that was reported on in the beginning and then it just disappeared, whether it was misinformation or not. I mean, we have a pool of blood in Dealey Plaza that's not really found out what that meant. So again, I don't know. Again, these are just things where it's trying to find the truth in it all. I think we get lost in the who.
No, I would give that some credence because it's very specific that a Secret Service agent was shot, which is weird. Like if that didn't happen, like why did somebody say that that happened? That isn't, but there is no information on that. I mean, it just vanished into the ether. The other thing with the George Hickey thing is the guy standing next to Hickey is Dave Powers, and that is Kennedy's guy. And so, if the guy next to him had shot Kennedy in the head, Powers is going to say, "Hey, I know what happened. The guy next to me shot Kennedy in the head." Like, how does he miss that? That's even giving this even the slightest bit of credence, which I do not. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Again, another thing that kind of gets brought up, we mentioned in the beginning, and I kind of want to get your opinion on here, is the whole argument at Love Field. There was an argument. A lot of people bring this up that it was a way to get LBJ trying to get John Connolly out of the limousine so he doesn't get hit by the bullets because he knew what was going to happen when they approached Dealey Plaza. That one doesn't make sense to me. I knew there was an argument. I do believe that, and I think it's well talked about and well recorded. But I believe the argument was between either Yarborough and Johnson or Yarborough and John Connolly. Yarborough says it was over John Connolly, Nellie Connolly, and Yarborough. Or no, LBJ said it was about Yarborough, John, and Nellie. John said it was about Yarborough and LBJ. I'm more likely to believe that LBJ was being himself and Yarborough was not liking it and he was just pissing off Yarborough. And LBJ didn't even know that Yarborough was mad at him until probably after the fact. But I
That would make perfect sense. Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, Johnson doesn't give a shit. Like, why is Johnson that concerned about Connolly? I mean, yeah, he's been his friend for a long time, but Johnson is not the kind of guy who has heartfelt friends. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to do whatever's politically expedient. I don't think that the whatever that argument was about, I do not think that it was a show of concern by LBJ over Connolly's safety. Like, I think that's the least plausible reason that they would have an argument. You know what I mean?
And I don't think, like, if you listen to a lot of theories out there of why they went to Dallas, it was brought up in the HSCA and John Connolly's testimony of the reason for going to Dallas. And it was about uniting the parties, that you had the Yarborough faction of conservatives or whoever that were supporting him, liberals that were supporting him. And then you had the John Connolly factor of the conservatives, and JFK had to make a presence there. Honestly, in my opinion, it looks like Dallas was not visited by JFK, and I think LBJ and Connolly both think that he needed to go to Dallas to try and win those people over, at least show that he cares about all of America, not just certain parts where he's getting a vote. I don't know what your opinion is on the whole reason for going to Dallas in the first place. Again, this is another theory
Because
that
they can
Dallas,
control the investigation.
that's why you think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Could I ask
I mean,
why?
they were because the places that they were going to kill him, Chicago, Florida, and Texas, are all places where you can control the investigation, right? The Dallas police, from the beginning, are in the pocket of the government. They're doing an incredibly bad job of investigating this murder, and they don't care. They don't care about Kennedy. They care when one of their cop friends has been when they announce that a police officer has been murdered, then the cops go into a frenzy of activity. Before that, it was like, I mean, they didn't care about Kennedy. And it's the same thing. So when you look at the various places where they were going to kill Kennedy, where there was a group that was going to do it, they're doing it in places where things can be controlled in Mayor Dealey's Chicago and in Florida and in Texas. Texas was like the pre-milk because you got Johnson. Yeah.
What about the delaying of the motorcade? Originally that motorcade, like there was conversations with John Connolly Kennedy and LBJ about discussing when they were going to have it. I think LB or Kennedy suggested doing it on Johnson's birthday, and John Connelly said you shouldn't do that because it's just a bad thing. And LBJ, you just don't want. He's trying to steer it away from. You don't want to take the spotlight off LBJ. You should do it later. And then I think it was August that was mentioned. And then he was like, no, because people are going to be on vacation. It's not the right time for it. And then I think they eventually decided on going when they went in November. But I think JFK was talking about, they mentioned that he was talking about 4 or 5 fundraising dinners that he wanted to do to raise support for election while he's down there and stuff like that. And LB or Connolly was more kind of questioning, like, you don't want to come off like you're just worried about the money aspect. Surprisingly, he talked a lot like he knew Dallas, but he also didn't consider Adlai Stevenson and the Walker incidents threats. This was a problem for the HSCA. He's like, you didn't consider that any type of danger or anything like that in the climate of Texas? He was like, no, I didn't at all.
Yeah, Fletcher Prouty did. Fletcher Prouty mentions it. Yeah, no, it's hard to it's hard to know what's going on, really. Uh, the main thing to know is that Kennedy doesn't know he's going to get killed. So he's treating it as if it's a normal political trip. So I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And there are people who know that they have to kill him at a certain point. So they have to nail down a time where this is going to happen. Um, but this is probably being, you don't really know, but this is probably being influenced by some of the mechanics who are going to do the operation. There are probably good times, and there's probably some reason that they wanted to do it in November rather than August. What these reasons were, I couldn't tell you. But I assume that's what's going on, that there are logistics and mechanical parts of the operation that have to be set. And this is what they're worried about.
Why do you think they chose the trademark instead of using the women's building? Apparently, the Secret Service stated that it could have been better protection, just because it would have been more contained, and they were able to have a better spot for JFK to give his speech. But they did the trademark instead, and that necessarily you don't have to use Dealey Plaza to go and get to the women's building.
Right. Yeah. They clearly wanted the Dealey Plaza route because of that turn that has to be made, and they had decided that that was the best place to kill him. But as far as like why it was the trade versus the women's bill, I mean, I don't know, except that they needed to get him in that spot because that was the spot that they had decided that they were going to kill him at for good reasons. I mean, Dealey Plaza is a good spot, to kill somebody because of that turn. You have to slow down, and of course, Greer slowed down even more than you have to. He was going at a snail's pace, and then he hit the brakes and checked. Is he dead yet?
You say who? Could I ask who you think was kind of behind the Machiavellian way of kind of working this in?
Behind the actual like plotting of I mean,
It can be that, but
as
or it could even just be there are some people that in the CIA, I think we've talked about plausible deniability, but there are some people who are not informed on a great plan. One, for instance, John Connolly. If they tell him get the trademark, and he goes and gets the trademark, that's his goal. He doesn't need to ask questions about certain things. Again, I don't think it was a whole Machiavellian thing. I think it could have been just someone up there. I don't know if it was Oswald or not really, but I definitely think there was more than one that got him into that position. But again, when it comes to trying to find the at least basis point to get people all on board or just kind of having the discussion and opening this up more than just the things that kind of we don't have evidence on, I don't know.
well, there are different. I mean, different people have to be used because there's different aspects of this that are going on. But as far as the designer, I assume that it was Alan Dulles because Alan Dulles had done these kinds of operations before in other countries, and he'd been doing it for a long time at this point. He was an official planner. The Jacob Arbenz thing, for example, the coup is Alan Dulles. He drew up those plans. He's the guy who put everything together. So he would be the natural person to put together the Kennedy assassination. I can't say that I know that for sure, but if you're just logically looking at what has to be done, and who's the person who has the life experience to do this sort of thing, the answer is Alan Dulles.
Now, when we look at people like John Connelly and LBJ, people that think they were the ones behind this whole thing, or it was just kind of planned strategic thing. I wanted to kind of ask about why do you think that Connelly was so about delaying it, not just about picking a date later down the line, but just didn't want to go earlier. He was very opposed of the motorcade. He stated that in his HSCA testimony. Now, look, I'm letting you know he's lying about certain things. The main thing is that he said that he didn't want to overwork the president, and that's why he was concerned about a motorcade and these types of situations. Yet he had no concern over protection of rooftops, no bother of his men talking to the Secret Service agents and asking what protection that was going to be happening for the president when he's riding in an open top car. So obviously he wasn't that concerned with the president's safety, but he did say that he was delaying the trip because he was running for an election and he was trying to get more votes and trying to handle that before he could spend most of his time or full focus on the Dallas trip. I just don't think he ever got his full focus in. I think he got what results he wanted, and then he just kept not paying attention to it and neglecting certain things. There's no way you can explain neglecting Secret Service stuff and then getting into a fight with what is it,
Yeah, but
Jerry Bruno.
Connolly is not an expert on that stuff.
Well, he got his men to do it, and he didn't check with them.
Yeah, which is the kind of thing that somebody would do if they weren't specifically concerned with that. There's, see, I think fundamentally, like Connolly doesn't know that Kennedy is going to get shot because obviously he's not going to ride in the same car. And in fact, he says, my God, they're going to shoot us all or something like that during the course of the happenings. But Connolly is not going to ride in a car with his wife. It's getting shot at. Like, so Connolly doesn't know that this is going to go down. So I think you have to interpret everything that Connolly is doing as a normal politician. Whatever his reasons are for delaying the trip, they're political reasons. They're not for reasons of, oh, we have to get this assassination done. He's not thinking in those terms because he's not thinking he's going to get shot, shot at. Um, and the security detail, again, I'm kind of a little bit more willing to be forgiving of that stuff because that's not really his mode of operation. Like he doesn't deal with this stuff all the time. He's got people who deal with this stuff. So he just assumes, oh, they'll take care of it. But he's not going to be checking the windows, like Fletcher Prouty or somebody who really knows this stuff. So I don't know. I'm kind of, I'm not going to hit him too hard for that.
I get that for sure. I just think the excuses, like even with James Rowley talking about his Secret Service agent's reaction time, his HSCA testimony goes, well, if you look, I don't think the Zapruder film shows it. And it's like, well, then how can we prove it if we don't have film and we don't have the exact photo moment you're mentioning? But he talks about there were some agents with the doors open, like they were going to hop out of the car. But everyone, the HSA was like, well, the only person we saw react was Clint Hill. And that was his other example of the agent's reaction in time was that you could saw Clint Hill jumping on the back of the limousine. So he thought their reaction times were fine, but how do you prepare for an instance where a shot's fired?
Yeah, but
That
he's bureaucratically protecting his agency.
100%. That's what I'm saying is that, he's lying. Obviously, he's doing it to protect his credibility and the Secret Service's credibility as well, too. But I think that's like with John Connolly. He's lying the same thing to respect his credibility on things. Um,
Yeah, in other words, he doesn't have to be in on it either. I mean, he may well have been, I don't know, but if he wasn't, he's still going to have the same interests. He's still going to, I mean, that's what everybody counts on in something like this, is that all the different, agencies and people, they're going to protect their agencies regardless of whether they knew it was going to happen or not.
Yeah, Hoover, for instance, everything was respecting the credibility of the FBI.
That's all he cared about. Yes, I'm going to maintain my position, and the FBI will not be besmirched by this happening. And I don't know about this Oswald guy. They're pushing all this stuff out of the way because they are protecting their own interests. Period.
I think it's like
And
what Thunheim said about the what they could be keeping or what the cover up is. He thought a lot of it was just everyone kind of cutting off their ties with the fact that they knew of Oswald before the assassination. Again, there's way more evidence on a cover up than there is of the actual who did it in the assassination. We're using pieces of the cover up to analyze guilt and see where things were for the assassination. And at this point now, I'm like, let's stop trying to figure out the who of it all and let's just get into what we can factually prove, which is the cover up for sure. But again, document destruction of the Secret Service, is that a thing of guilt, or is it the fact they're covering their ass because the Secret Service isn't as good as we think they are? I mean, drinking on duty, LBJ had problems with the Secret Service in his presidency as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that certain individuals in the Secret Service have to be aware of it. And in fact, it's a truism. I think this may be von Clausewitz, uh, who said that every political assassination, the security is compromised. That's the first thing that you look for, is that in order to kill somebody in a head of state, you have to compromise security. And then once you've done that, it's easy. Which is, yeah. I mean, some of the Secret Service are in on it for sure, and some of them, the rest of them, just hate Kennedy.
You think it's a lot that didn't care about Kennedy? Because obviously, clearly with Johnson, I like again, I'm a little bit with the Jackie stuff because I know he did like try and get Jackie more money when Kennedy died. Got a bill passed to get her an extra $50,000 per year, based on her mail opening or something of that sort. That she was already entitled to 10,000. I think he got it raised by another 50,000. So he was like, I think he called her a lot, and I think they had like this trying good relationship a little bit. So I have a little bit more balance with that. But I think like if you honestly examine certain things, like we talk about the respecting the credibility and stuff like that of certain individuals. Anyone that gained something after the assassination, and there was a lot of people that got something, not just the Bobby Baker scandals for LBJ or the benefits of money for others. Hoover got to be director for life. There was a lot of things where I think the people that didn't care about Kennedy just maintained that perspective. There wasn't any more, oh, well, he's dead. I got to do something because it was my fault. It was more like, whatever. And they kind of moved on and they benefited greatly and got what they wanted across now that he was out of the way, which people can say is guilt. And I don't know. I can't make that claim, but there's evidence to support that a lot of people after the fact, John Connelly, the only people that I saw actually get torn up and stayed by JFK's side was Ted Sorensen and then Kenny O'Donnell. I think Kenny O'Donnell got hit the hardest out of it, the whole thing, because he states it. I know he stayed and everything like that for a little while, but Malcolm Kilduff talked about like he didn't think ever Kenny O'Donnell ever recovered from losing the president.
Yeah, and Joe McBride, uh, he thinks that Kenny O'Donnell was in on it,
Damn it.
on the assassination. It was the one thing I disagreed with him about in his book, and I told him, we talked about it. But I mean, I kind of get it.
Well, they're still holding a lot of his tapes back and like records and transcripts, so that's very suspicious in its own.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if any of that stuff ever gets released, because I mean, I'm sort of on the fence now about Kenny O'Donnell, which I was not before, but I am a little bit now. I'm coming around to Joe's perspective on that. So that, I mean, that may be part of why they're saying that he's so been out of shape, is that he was willingly part of the coup.
I've only heard one thing I think of Malcolm Kilduff stating that when he was at Parkland Hospital and he was informed that the president was dead and now he's got to make an announcement. He just unknowingly walked up to LBJ and said, "Mr. President," and then he heard Jackie gasp, like just make a like a deep like that type of noise. Um, and he asked him what to do next, and LBJ says, "I think you better get me out of here, just in case that there's anybody that's going to be, going for a vice president or something or another thing." And that's when they rushed him to the um, airport and everything. But then Malcolm Kilduff went up to Kenny O'Donnell. "What should I do? I have to go read that the president is dead." And Kenny O'Donnell just gave him like a flat answer and didn't sound like he was crying or couldn't reach for words. It was just a quick, like, "You got to do this now," or something like that. So it makes it kind of hard. He's conflicting himself with Kenny O'Donnell being really torn up, or maybe he was in shock. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people, I don't get after people because people react to grief in like every way imaginable. Um, I don't think you can, I don't think you can tell anything about what a person's really feeling in a situation. Like some people will go to pieces and start crying. Some people won't. Some people just go completely, they'll do all of their functions. I'm kind of like that. Like, um, so it depends. I think it's hard to gauge people's reactions in a situation like that.
I want to ask about there's a thing that happens, and I think we've all seen the photograph. LBJ being sworn in
Yeah.
on Air Force One
You
doesn't look
talking about the
good.
wink?
Well, not we can talk about the wink for sure. It's Thomas Albert, but we can also talk about Jackie standing right beside him. You hear many theories about this one. I want to get your thoughts on the wink photograph and just the whole swearing in.
Yeah, that's pretty hard to explain. He clearly wanted Jackie there to endorse his presidency, his swearing in. Um, it was very cruel, I think, to get Jackie to do that. Um, but I think he wanted it he wanted her in the photograph. He wanted to say, okay, Jackie is backing me as the president in essence. Now the wink, I mean, with Thomas Albert, it's like he had the wherewithal to have this exchange in the middle of this terrible day. I think it's hard to read that as anything but um, implicit, that he knows he's getting the presidency and he knows exactly how this came about. Um, yeah, I mean, it shows guilt for sure. Well, why else would you do this? Like, why else would you have that little? Because they're like smirking, like like tee hee, isn't this cute? I'm getting sworn in as the president. Like that's a completely inappropriate reaction. That's crazy.
Would it be possible that even over something as horrible as that, that is still a celebration that he did become the president? So wouldn't it just be like a? It's kind of like you find out someone that you loved, like a family member passed away, but you're also graduating. So like you're getting a
I th
diploma and your dad's down there like, hey, I know we got this that we have to deal with, but you did it, dude. Let's not let this moment go away because you only get it once type. I only say that because there's only one conversation with Thomas Albert. It's 10 minutes long, and he uses the Johnson treatment. Johnson is like bullying the shit out of him, where I go, I don't think you guys were that close of friends. Like LBJ sitting there going, I don't know how you could screw me over on this and how you could do that. He became like this with Connelly later when Connelly started to write a book on the assassination.
Johnson talked like that to everybody. I mean, that's why I was saying I don't think Johnson has a lot of, heart to heart friends. He has political people who can help him and political people who can't. And Johnson's concern was with people who could help him. Like politicians are like they're a different breed, man. I mean, and especially somebody like Johnson, who just, somebody who's going to take his dick out and pee on his Secret Service detail. This is not a guy that is concerned with other human beings. Like he's not looking out for their welfare.
And
Yeah,
have you ever heard that RFK was the one that told LBJ he needed to be sworn in?
I don't think so.
Because apparently Johnson already knew he was president after Malcolm Kilduff had stated it to him, but Kilduff had also stated, and others had also stated in private oral histories, that RFK had told LBJ that he needed to be sworn in. And that's when they had to call Sarah T. Hughes down. And that's where, again, you get to the lost Bible situation that became a Kennedy Bible, personal Kennedy Bible. It's not that at all. It's regular Bible. Sarah T. Hughes had it. It was found within like a month after a lot of this stuff came out. But a lot of things I've noticed with LBJ theories and ideas and rumors and stories. Um, I think a lot of it came from Manchester's book, and I don't think it's accurate. Certain things with like Jackie even got pissed off at it because I think it said some things about her and accusing her of some stuff. But I've noticed that some of the memory of LBJ and things people use as references of LBJ did it were from like Manchester's book, and or a thing that we just, you ask them, what about the argument at Love Field? Where did you hear that? It's just known. It's not like it's a thing that came out of a specific thing, but I think it just got story told too many times and the words changed up a little bit. So, I mean, I don't believe all the stuff about LBJ, but I just was curious on the RFK thing I just asked you. And then some of the stuff of like Manchester creating some of the mythos behind LBJ.
Yeah, I don't doubt that that's true because Manchester fouled up a bunch of stuff in his book, and he he appears to have, how do I want to say this? I think Manchester was trying earnestly to capture this event, but he also had enormous pressure on him. And I think that comes out in the text, the level of pressure that Manchester had to get everything right according to the government. You know what I mean? Like he did not want to put anything in that book that would lead anyone to believe something untoward had happened. So he's doing his best to catalog truthful events while not giving meat for the conspiracy theorists, quote unquote. Um, and Manchester was clearly, uh, I mean, he's talking about it. He was beat up by the process of getting the book done. Like it was an ordeal to get that book done for Manchester. So I don't know. Did he screw up some things? Did he lie in places? I mean, he probably, yeah, because he did foul up some things in his book. And I've never trusted it as a Bible of the Kennedy assassination. I've never used Manchester's book for anything.
What about his tapes still being sealed? I mean, it would prove to us a lot of interview stuff he included in his book that he said George Berkeley said and others.
Yeah, no, that would be really interesting to hear. And who knows? Maybe we'll
Um,
get to hear.
I got a lot of clips we're going to be playing here at the end. A lot of things. Again, like I said, going through all this and trying just to get your opinion because I respect your opinion and I think you have a good understanding of deep politics when it came to some of this stuff. Texas was a fraternity. I mean, the guy who created the John Birch Society, his last name's Welch. He also made Milk Duds and he made Junior Mints. He's a candy magnate, which is surprising. So there's a lot of like very Texasy or kind of right wing, hardcore, extremist type things that are in this case for sure. There's a lot of that with Dallas police and other individuals that are involved. But a lot of people forget LBJ is a Democrat. And, he already was complaining about that he had too many Republicans already on the Warren Commission. He was probably going to receive some criticism for doing that. So we get into this conversation. I think a lot of people, like I see people even like LBJ was a racist just like Trump. They're identical. And I'm like, in a sense, but they're not like political parties. I don't know what you're trying to hint at here. But a lot of people forget that LBJ was a Democrat. I mean, he didn't like the Republicans either. He had certain strong views on individuals that were Republicans, but he was a little bit more not lenient, but like again, I think he was more focused on the press and the domestic issues that he was going to be facing as president rather than the whole Vietnam and following up a whole year after Kennedy's death with issues with the assassination.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring up something I brought up before. I mean, LBJ started the Job Corps program. Trump destroyed it. So yeah, they're not the same guy, right? I mean, Trump is not starting any programs for anybody. So it's kind of foolish to equate the two individuals. The fact that you don't like them both doesn't make them identical. And I think people on the internet don't really understand that. You know,
Did you know why Richard Russell didn't want to serve on the Warren Commission?
no, um, I mean, I kind of suspect that he probably had some information beforehand that he kind of knew that he might be a dissenting voice on this thing. I think that's probably why he didn't want to get his whole he didn't want to muck about in that. And I get that. In fact, really nobody wanted to serve other than Alan Dulles and maybe Jerry Ford. They didn't. Nobody really wanted to serve on this commission.
Do you know
Not
why,
even Warren,
what their excuse was for it?
because they didn't want to participate in. And I suspect, again, this is pure speculation, that they knew that what had happened, that the government had killed Kennedy, and they did not want to serve on a commission that was going to lie about it.
Their excuse, or Russell's excuse, was I don't want to serve with Earl Warren. He refused to serve with that guy, and LBJ told him in that same conversation, says, "You're goddamn going to serve." He says, "You're going to do what's best for your country. You're not going to do it for me." He's like, "You can work with this man and do this." And then RFK went to Earl Warren and asked him. Earl Warren turned him down. LBJ went to him and turned him down. But LBJ got dirt on him from Hoover and caused Earl Warren to be involved in the commission. Now, I think we all know that Earl Warren blocked certain members of the commission to be able to see autopsy photographs. He did a private interview with Jackie Kennedy. He was too close to it personally to be involved in investigating the John F. Kennedy's death. But I kind of wanted to understand, were you shocked to know that they were suggesting other people over Earl Warren first before Earl Warren was selected?
To run it. I mean, there were a few names that were thrown out. I don't remember a whole lot about that, but um, that was in oh God, I forgot the name of the book. Um, yeah, this is Never Have a Stroke. It plays hell with your memories, but yeah, there's a book that talks about that, but I can't remember what it is right now, off the top of my head.
What is your stance on Katzenbach? He's one more name I thought to mention because of he gets brought up a lot, involved in the conspiracy because of the fact that he said that it was Oswald and made a statement to the press very early on, and Hoover told him to not do that because it was making it look bad, and he was kind of not knowing what he was talking about. Do you think he was involved? Because I don't know what I think at this point. I've heard a few personal
I
testimonies from
think
him.
Katzenbach is a functionary who will do whatever the government needs at any given moment. I talked about him in relation to Malcolm X because in the last year of Malcolm X's life, he wanted the government to prosecute him under the Logan Act, which is an act that makes it illegal for individuals to make treaties with with other countries. It was totally ridiculous. It was a completely baseless thing, but he wanted the government to do this just to fuck with Malcolm X, basically, because Malcolm was going to these different countries and he was being treated as an ambassador. Obviously he had no standing with the government, but they treated him like an ambassador because of his goodwill and because he was going to places like Libya, which had traditionally not been friends of the United States. So yeah, Katzenbach is I would call him a functionary, one of those guys that will just do whatever needs to be done as far as the government is concerned.
Do you think that's a
Um,
lot like with Dean Rusk and Robert McNamara?
totally. Well, McNamara is more conflicted, but McNamara,
Because eventually he's friends with
you,
LBJ and they're talking back and forth.
yeah, I mean, we could do it until he gets fired by LBJ. McNamara is kind of a different kettle of fish. He is a kind of faux intellectual, um, although he is very smart. He has a lot of cunning. Um, I don't trust a damn word that McNamara says. Um, yeah, I don't think that, I don't want to put this. I'm pretty sure McNamara knew what happened and he chose to serve with the new president anyway. Um, and then he did a lot of horrible things like, burning 100,000 Japanese citizens to death in a fire attack on Tokyo. Um, the fact that he later acknowledged his role in that, it doesn't absolve him. You know, he
What
was
ab-
perfectly willing to murder people, in other words.
what other names can you think of, if you can, that I guess, found out probably later what happened that you think found out later what happened and just never did anything about it?
I think almost everybody. And if they didn't understand it at first, it's kind of like 9/11. It took me about 6 months to deal with 9/11 to be like, holy shit, the government. And the 9/11 story is really stupid. Like it's rife with impossibilities. But it took me several months to get myself in the frame of mind of like, oh my God, of course, like how did these guys do this? You knock down three buildings with two planes, and it's pretty efficient. Um, and I think the same thing is true of the people who were at that time. Not everybody is Vince Landry. Vince Landry had things figured out by the Monday after the assassination. But most people, it took them a lot of time. And of course, if you work in the government, you don't want to believe that this entity you're working for did these things. So either you end up taking a hard line against all that stuff, or you covertly understand that's what happened and you block it away and you keep working. Because what are you going to do? You're going to line up with a dead guy, or you're going to line up with Lyndon Johnson, who was already, the most powerful man in Texas, and then he became the president, and he doesn't screw around. Do you really want to go against Lyndon Johnson? Not really. You know,
Do you think that's
not
how
if
he was
you're
able
some
to
low-level functionary.
You think that's how he was able to get so much of his things passed? The whole Johnson treatment in general. I mean, if you watch it, it's pretty. Well, it's impressive in my opinion. I think as a politician, that's a crazy move to play, and I think it helped him get a lot of things that necessarily we probably wouldn't have gotten past for a long time. The civil rights stuff, importantly. Again, I know a lot of people don't want to mention that because they're like, well, he took it from Kennedy. Not saying we're taking it from Kennedy either, but I'm just saying I think LBJ was the person at that time for that to be able to get those things across, and I think he did that. And I think we kind of forget about that because the Vietnam War stuff. But again, I even think with the Vietnam War, you listen to his phone calls, he doesn't really want any problems or dealings with it. But then he feels like he's locked in a situation where he can't back down. People are telling him not to back down or he's going to look soft. Richard Russell was telling him that. Then I'm going to kind of, once we kind of end our little talking point here, we're going to kind of go into some of these clips. But do you think a lot of stuff just goes from just bad information, bad sources? I mean, we got people in Kennedy's administration telling him one thing that's wrong information, Bay of Pigs or Cuban involvement or all these types of missile issues. And then we got with Johnson in Vietnam. We're winning over there. Johnson's not paying attention because he's focused on some Manchester writing or something like that. I mean, do you think this is a lot of just people in the administration that were wanting things to go their certain way and it was kind of leading into, okay.
Always. I mean, if you've worked for any corporation, if you've ever been in a corporate meeting and you've got 20 people in the meeting, you have 20 agendas. And that's just a normal corporation, which I've worked for a few in my life. And they're all looking to get their special project through because they want to get promoted and to get more. Okay, but imagine what it's like at the governmental level, right? You've got all these incredibly ambitious people working in the same place, all trying to get over on each other. So that's a reality of working out. And the two things you said, I think, are exactly correct. That Lyndon Johnson is the right guy at the right moment to get the civil rights bill passed, which, yes, it's inherited from Kennedy, but yes, LBJ deserves significant credit for getting that thing passed. And he also thought that he would he agreed, in other words, that we're going to do the Vietnam War the way you boys want to after Kennedy gets killed. But then that turns into this big shitstorm that he was not really prepared for. He was not really thinking that this, we're going to invade this place and we're going to kill them and, we're going to be fine. He didn't know that it was going to turn into this giant sand trap and that we're going to lose the war. Um, you know, and some of those struggles, I think, are reflected in the fact that, after Johnson withdrew um, in '68, that Johnson did not do very well, and he had a psychiatrist, and He maybe had a mental
He was
breakdown.
taking like,
All
what is
these
it, glycerin pills or something like that for his heart because he was taking like 5 of them every 10 minutes or something like that because he was just going
some
through so
crazy,
much.
yeah, yeah. So again, these are going back to this issue of these are complicated human beings doing different things. Um, and I think that's what's going on there with Johnson.
Again, like I said, I've heard a lot of negative, negative, negative on Johnson, and I've had historians of Johnson on here that think completely differently. And I'm trying to find a more balanced approach. That's how I'm trying to do here. I'm not, I do believe conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination, but I think the evidence is just with the cover up. Sometimes it can be as simple as just it's as bad as covering up the fact that you didn't do your job. But the brain missing, can't explain that one. Autopsy changing so much, can't explain that one. That's really messed up, whoever did that and was willing to do that. But again, you have someone like Richard Russell whispering into your ear that you got to keep supplying more troops and throwing more money into this thing, or we can't look like we're backing down, or you're going to cause a whole cascade of problems. And LBJ's doing that. Well, I mean, what do you do? The guy who is bullied by Johnson to go on the commission is the same guy telling him he needs to go put more troops into Vietnam. You're now conflicted as someone that is anti-Vietnam but pro-Kennedy. Again, so it's one of those issues. I'm going to play some clips here. Hopefully, we can kind of walk through this. I think I got everything we talked about. So hopefully, I don't miss out on things. I might miss out on a couple. I'll play them. If you feel like you need to say something after the clip's over, just say something. I'll pause it. This first one right here, this is George Reedy. Now, look, a lot of people have big thoughts on George Reedy. He was there for Kennedy as well, too. But here's the best way I can describe it. It's by Malcolm Kilduff's statement about George Reedy. George Reedy's George Reedy's office was in the basement. So that's all you need to know about George Reedy. But this is his view on the escalation of Vietnam.
One other very, very insidious thing. My most vivid memory is the day after Johnson became president. And he called a meeting, and all the Kennedy people and all the Johnson people were in that meeting. Now, I knew that Johnson wanted to demonstrate a continuity of Kennedy policies. He wanted to show the country that a crackpot with a mail-order rifle could not kill the United States. And I suddenly realized the strange air in that room. He was looking to the Kennedy people for an idea what Kennedy would have done, and they were looking to him for an idea what he wanted done. Now, either at that meeting or a later one, I have a feeling that somebody misread a signal, and that Johnson thought that Kennedy was going to continue to prosecute Vietnam. I don't think anybody knew, but I think that's what he thought. And I think that, therefore, that he beefed it up a little bit without realizing that every step was a greater commitment.
I mentioned this and I put that on the table. I understand you don't agree, Joe, but let me just explain it so you can explain your point. Didn't Kennedy apparently say that he was going to pull out troops, but he only spoke to like one other individual and it was privately? So at the time, maybe Johnson didn't know that Kennedy was willing. They didn't never talk. So the only person I could think of that would have known this information is someone close to Kennedy. The only possible person I could think of is fucking Bobby. Just based on Malcolm Kilduff, he goes, any story you read where someone says Jack said this, they're lying. Nobody called him Jack. Only people that called him Jack was Jackie and then Bobby. And that was like 1% of the time you would hear, because Bobby made it a rule and everyone in his administration made a rule that when he became president, he was now called Mr. President. That makes the most sense. And I think that's a good basis to go off of. Now, what's your disagreement with George Reedy on this?
Yeah, I think he's preposterous. I think the idea that Johnson was unclear about what they just killed Kennedy, and Johnson is now unclear about Kennedy's goals in Vietnam. If Kennedy's goals in Vietnam have been aligned with the DoD, there's no reason to kill him. Now, George Reed's talking shit. That's ridiculous. I have a hard time believing that even George believed what he just said. I think that's a story.
Okay. I want to play this because I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I think we've all assumed that people just fed inside information to people that were no longer presidents. This was a conversation with Richard Helms on 11/13/68. So LBJ is about to not be president any longer. And this is about I think it's interesting.
That sitting down there on the ranch, And everybody asking you from time to time what's happening, commenting and imagining that you're one of one or two men that have been president. You need good information. And when you asked me what to tell him, I said everything I know, everything you tell me. And that's what I told Buzz Wheeler and the rest of them to do with Truman, with Eisenhower. And I've had a perfect relationship. And I really want to help him because we're in trouble, and I know the trouble I've had, and I don't have the answers. And I hope he does. I want to help him get them any way I can. But I can't have them unless I have a little information. And from time to time, I want somebody to come down, and I don't have to go to Dick Russell or somebody in the House or George Mahon.
He's basically saying, keep me informed when I'm no longer president, asking Richard Russell. He also asked Richard Russell, because I think at the time Nixon was president, that he would have to go to Nixon and request permission first, just so he's not stepping on Nixon's toes, because Nixon was very not playing that type of thing. He was a very Boy Scout type. Richard, that's what the conversation was about. I think we've all known that there's inside information that was going on being leaked to certain individuals, but LBJ was acting like I did the same thing for Eisenhower and the same thing I did for Truman. So he was obviously still feeding information back to them. So when the press would ever contact them, they would have some informed choices, or so they're not giving.
Or he's saying that to Helms to try and get him to continue to feed him information.
I do think Truman was informed on a lot more than he probably should have been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that is, but I mean, in the context of this conversation, we don't really know that because Johnson's just saying these things because he wants to essentially be informed as if he were the president. And he probably knows that's not likely to happen, especially with somebody like Helms, who's already going to be filtering that information. You know what I'm saying? Like, Helms has got his own agenda, like all these guys do.
I'm gonna
I don't go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna play a clip by Richard Russell. This was on 11/29/63. I'm not gonna play all the ones like the damn lie one because that's just public, and I'm sure if anybody's watching this, they've seen that already. But this wasn't Khrushchev, maybe Castro, which was them talking about other people besides Lee Harvey Oswald.
But you're gonna lend your name to this thing because you're head of the CIA committee in the Senate, and you're gonna have Fulbright and Hickenlooper on it because this thing is breaking faster than you think. And I already talked to Hickenlooper and Fulbright and asked them to go with you, sit on your committee because I don't want these things torn up. Secretary of State came over here this afternoon. He's deeply concerned, Dick, about the idea that they're spreading throughout the communist world that Khrushchev killed Kennedy. Now, he didn't. He didn't have a damn thing to do with it.
I don't think he did directly.
Well,
no, Khrushchev didn't, but he thought he'd get along better with Kennedy.
all right. But we got to have some people.
I wouldn't be surprised if Castro had.
All right.
You hear that? I wouldn't be surprised if Castro had something
and
to do
people
with it.
got confidence in you, and you can just be surprised or not surprised. They want to know what you think.
He said, I won't be surprised if Castro had something involved with it. This one, I'm not going to play this one first. I'm actually going to play the FBI got the conclusion. Same day with Richard Russell.
Wait a minute. I understand that. But now your president's asking you to do these things, and there's some things that I want you in besides civil rights. And by God, you're going to be in them because I can't run this country by myself. And
My future's behind me, and that's not entering into it at all.
well, your future is your country, and you're gonna do everything you can to serve America. And
I can't do it. I haven't got the time.
all right. We'll just make the time.
All my Georgia items in there.
Well, we'll just make the time. There's not going to be any time to begin with. All you're going to do is evaluate a Hoover report he's already made. But
Move that fast, don't
well, okay. Well, then we won't move any faster than you want to move.
Again, talking about the Hoover report. This one that's about Earl Warren. I'll play that one next. This one is the report still. It's on 11/29.
On about a 7-man board to evaluate Hoover's report, and it'll be largely done by staff, but they can work on it. Bill, give me that list of the people, and I want to get your reaction to it. I think that'd be better than judiciary running one investigation, the House running another investigation, and having profiles going in opposite directions.
Well, I agree with that, but I don't think that Hoover ought to make his report too soon.
He's ready with it now, and he wants to get it off just as quick as he can.
Uh-oh.
And he'd probably have it out today, if most on Monday.
Well, he ain't going to publish the damn thing, is he?
He's going to turn it over to this group. And there's some things about it I can't talk about.
Yeah, I understand that. But I think it'd be mighty well if that thing was kept quiet another week, 10 days.
I love Richard Russell and LBJ just for the way that they talk. It's like Sawyer for the HSCA. They got this Southern accent and they say shit that doesn't make sense. It's kind of like William F. Buckley in that debate where he was like, "I'll sock you and you'll stay plastered." I'm like, the nonsense is that? So this is Earl Warren Turn Me Down. This is now Richard Russell and LBJ had like 10 different conversations throughout like those couple of days. Like it was not just like he called him 3 times when he was announcing the Warren Commission, when he was just running people by him. This is about Earl Warren Turn Me Down on 11/30/63.
He said a man that criticized this fellow that went on the Nuremberg trial, Jackson. He told me what he thought about Goldberg. He thought he's terrible. He's arbitrated track. And I said, let me read you one report. And I just picked up one report and read it to him. And I said, okay. Now, well, 40 million Americans involved here.
I may be wholly wrong, but I think Mr. Warren would serve on anything and give him any publicity. Unfortunately,
well, you want me to tell you the truth? You know what happened? Do you know what happened? Bobby and them went up to see him today, and he turned them down cold and said no.
Yeah.
2 hours later, I called him and ordered him down here, and he didn't want to come. I insisted he come. He came down here, and he told me no twice. Then I just pulled out what Hoover told me about the little incident in Mexico City, and I said, now, I don't want Mr. Khrushchev to be told tomorrow and be testifying before camera that he killed this fella.
You see what I'm saying? He had some dirt to pull on Earl Warren to get him to serve on that commission, something that Hoover gave him. Now, I will play this. It's Christopher Dodd from the HSCA. He mentions the conclusion was already selected.
As an indication that the Warren Commission was really a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it was not designed to investigate the assassination of the president from a de novo position, but rather to confirm what the FBI had already concluded, what the Dallas police had concluded, and that therefore the Warren Commission didn't really fulfill its obligation, the obligation that Chief Justice Warren outlined when he said our responsibility is to get at the truth.
I don't want to get by just with deer filing your report.
I think it'd be very, very bad to have a rash of investigations.
Well, the only way we can stop them is probably to appoint a high-level one to evaluate your report.
Yeah.
And put somebody that's pretty good on it from that I could select out of the government and tell the House and Senate not to go ahead with the investigation.
Yes.
Because we get up there and get a bunch of television going, and I thought it'd be bad.
It'd be a
three-ring circus. This one is I'd replace Earl Warren. This is with James Eastland. Now, he did contact James Eastland multiple times to tell him that if he's going to have his Senate, if they could control the talk of investigations. Because James Eastland was suggesting them. Hale Boggs had stood up and said it. LBJ had to call Hale Boggs and tell him, you've made this giant statement. I have to have you on my commission now. That would stop other investigations that you would be involved in if you just did the Warren Commission. That was kind of Hale Boggs being dragged into it. This is 11/29/63.
The president announced he is appointing a special commission to study all facts and circumstances relating to the assassination of the late president and the subsequent violent death of the man charged with the assassination. The president stated the majority and minority leaders of Senate and House of Representatives have been consulted with respect to the proposed special commission. The members of the special commission are Chief Justice Warren, Senator Richard Russell, Senator John Cooper, Representative Hale Boggs, Representative Gerald Ford, Honorable Allen Dulles, Honorable John J. McCloy. Now, we had to have a justice, and then I wanted to have the head of the CIA committee in the Senate that controls all their money and that they report to.
That's all right.
I thought I'd get Cooper because he'd had the international experience because this Russian thing's getting in it. I got Boggs. He's been talking over there, and Ford handles the money on appropriations, and then Dulles is ex-CIA, and John McCloy help it from an international standpoint a little bit. It gives us.
Prove it if you put Harlan on there instead of Warren.
Well,
See, Warren made a political. His eulogy of Kennedy was political.
yeah, but I've got to get the top one, and he's the chief.
Well, that's true.
That's true, and none of them want to do it, but I've got to do it, and you've got to protect my flank over in the Senate now.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's true. Just a quick little like pushover. That wasn't even any Johnson treatment. That's the argument at Love Field. I wanted to play two more before that one real quick. So this is Hoover Gave Me Some Dirt on Him. It's the LBJ and Richard B. Russell, 11/30/63.
We had a little incident in Mexico City, and I said, now, I don't want Mr. Khrushchev to be told tomorrow and be testifying before a camera that he killed this fella and that Castro killed him. And all I want you to do is look at the facts and bring any other facts you want in here and determine who killed the president. And I think you'd put on your uniform, World War I, fat as you are, and do anything you could to save one American life. And I'm surprised that you, the Chief Justice of the United States, would turn me down. And he started crying. He said, well, I won't turn you down. I'll just do whatever you say. But he turned the Attorney General down.
Well, you ought not be so persuasive.
Well, I think I ought to.
I think you did wrong getting Warren. I know damn well you got wrong getting me, but
No.
you both do the best you can.
I think that's what you do. That's kind of American, both of you are. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Called him before he went to bed. Look at that shit. What a good man. Kill him in his little bedtime stories. Let's do. All right, hold on. Sorry, the Zoom popped up. There we go. This is I thought this was funny. It's called You Ruined Me. I called it. It's on 12/7/63. So the commission was appointed 29th of November, and we have this about a week and a half later.
How you feeling today?
I don't feel very good. How do you feel?
Well, damn, I thought the sun's shining and everything.
Well, I can't get out in it. I'm just born down here working, got an office full of people, and just having. You destroyed me, putting me on this commission.
I did.
Yes.
How many times you've been destroyed in your life altogether?
This is the first time.
You've told me at least 100 times that you were ruined.
No, this is the first time. All I can't understand all you said about Warren. Here you are sitting up there by him. So
Well, you said a lot about a lot of folks you're sitting by. Everybody we fought in all these wars, you and that person. You got to save the country though. Now it's not a question of what you think about somebody. It's the other thing, and that's why you're such a patriot.
Guilting them by saying you're saving the country. This one, let's see. There's the argument at Love Field. I'll play that one after I play the problems with the commission. This is the Joe Aslop, 11/25/1963 talk about a commission. It's 11 parts. I'm only going to play one. Feel free, anybody, to go to find the other parts and listen to the full conversation.
Somebody from outside Texas. Somebody from outside Texas.
Well, they're going to have FBI from outside Texas, but this is under Texas law, and they take all the involvements, and we don't send in a bunch of carpetbaggers. It's the worst thing you could do right now.
You think so?
I know. Well, we got the FBI doing anything that, if there's any question about Texas operation, they got an FBI that's going to the bottom of it and direct with the Attorney General. But paralleling that is a blue ribbon state court of inquiry headed by the brilliant Attorney General, and associated with him somebody like St. John Garwood, Will Clayton's son-in-law, who was a brilliant Supreme Court justice that's retired. Somebody like Roberts did at Pearl Harbor. And that's what the Attorney General's doing. Now, if we have another commission, hell, you're going to have people running over each other, and everybody agrees. Now, I know that some of the lawyers, they thought of the Blue Ribbon Commission first.
So, again, these guys were talking about the Warren Commission. He was suggesting it to LBJ. LBJ was not only talking about the FBI report and focusing on that's going to be the main thing, but he's also talking about you can't piss off Texas and they're going to be not happy with you bringing in a bunch of people from out of town to do an investigation in their city. That's his home. So again, he knows. Yeah. So that's what that's something for me that was new to learn. I'm going to play the argument at Left Field, but I want you to listen to this one with Nicholas Katzenbach. He was asked about the HSCA. To me, just before it starts, it was the most kind of heartfelt thing I've ever heard someone say about RFK. And I honestly don't think he's lying at all. I think he's being genuine with it. And I think we kind of lump him into the he knew about it category, conspiracy. I'm sure he found out later for sure. But I think when we look at like his involvement and like his statements that he got yelled at for, I would take him a little bit less out of the conspiratorial side and more just like doing his job. So I'll play this real quick.
Assassination occurred. Robert Kennedy's world just came apart. Not only his affection for his brother, but everything that they had been trying to do, everything they had worked for a long time, just went with that shot. He was very devastated, both, I think, by the personal loss and by the sudden crashing halt of all of the things that he had worked for with his brother for a long period of time. His attitude was not difficult, I think, for those who knew him well to understand. He said nothing that was done was going to bring his brother back to life. And it was, I think, almost as simple as that, as far as he was concerned.
This one is another thing we mentioned, blood on the knoll. I wanted to mention this just so people see we're not just tossing out random things.
Well, I decided I'm going to look for Jim Hood, who was an advertising photographer we had in our department. And Jim was just coming in the door just a few minutes later, and I grabbed Jim and I said, Jim, I think I found some blood or something at the top of the steps over there where the shooting was. He said, really? I said, yeah. He said, let me get my camera. He had a, I guess you call them reflex cameras, the old time. Jim and I went down, back over to the steps. He bent down before he made a picture with his little finger, and it already began to crinkle, coagulate, I guess, and did this and said, boy, that's blood. You're right, that's blood. I didn't taste it. He did. Right there on the top of those steps. Very good. There we go. Okay. No one said a thing to us.
And I don't know if I can back it and see if it'll pop up. I do have clips also on the pool of blood if people want to look at that, but that's 2 minutes long. I can't play that one. It's about taking the evidence, the FBI coming and taking the evidence from him of his picture and everything like that. There's a photo you can look at, people, if you want to see the photo of the pool of blood in Dealey Plaza. I'm not going to play that one. I'm going to play this one. It's called A Damn Lie. This is about the William Manchester book in LBJ.
Now, if he can say that without his credibility being questioned, without leaving the impression that I'm forcing him to do it, that's what I would say.
Right. You want him to say that the president has no recollection?
No, hell no.
I mean, the president granted...
I have a recollection. It didn't happen. I think it's a goddamn lie. Now, that's my best judgment, which I'd bet my life on. I honestly don't think they thought it happened. I think this. I have had somebody tell me in the last week that Chuck Roberts, Jack Valenti told me over the phone that Chuck Roberts and Chuck Bailey and Peter Lissagore all were really thinking that I had been mistreated. I think what they do is call up some sap and tell them that, you see. You know Chuck Bailey doesn't think I'm mistreated. You know Lissagore doesn't. If they did, they'd be happy. Marlinoff, don't you think so? I do.
A lot of rumors and stuff came out that like LBJ thought he was mistreated and all this type of crap. And he was saying that people were saying it in his administration that felt like he was mistreated. He never said it, and it became attributed to LBJ. And then on top of that, like the Manchester stuff about being anti-Kennedy. This is a story from Muriel Dobbs that Malcolm Kilduff stated about LBJ.
Problem there was it all came from a girl with the Baltimore Sun, Muriel Dobbins. Muriel Dobbins had been out with him, out on the road. He was taking a group of reporters after one of his press conferences. He'd asked some of them to stay back, and he'd show them the ranch, and it was Mary Ann Means at first, and Muriel Dobbins was another one. And I forgot who the other two were. So he just drove them around to show them the ranch, and this was a very off-the-record type of thing. Where he enjoyed their company and the give and take from news people. And so they were riding around, and he had a beer in his little holder in the front there of the car. And he finished with it. He threw it out on his own property. It was not on a Texas State highway. It was on one of his own ranch roads. And Muriel Dobbins was, I guess, she came back to the Driscoll Hotel in Austin and just told everybody under the sun, oh, I went riding with the president and he was drinking beer and threw a beer can out. And from that, someone from the wires picked it up and it got on the wire. And once it gets on the wire, you know what the distribution there is. Yeah. It was nationwide. And it was a stupid thing for her to have done.
Again, how things can spread. I mean, do I think LBJ was probably tossed a beer can on the road somewhere, but a story about that can really distort a person's perspective. He's drinking, you just toss it out because he's the law of Texas and nobody can stop LBJ. I'm sure there's some of that, like we're working with the courts in the Mac Wallace situation. I think that's well documented, but stories can sometimes spread. It's about trying to find the factualization. I've heard a lot of things about LBJ from certain things and comments, and I was just trying to go back and trying to sort through a lot of things because I think, we're looking in the wrong area with LBJ. I think we should just look at the cover-up aspects of things and what he was trying to get quiet as much as possible. Joe, I know we didn't have a structure for what we were going to be really talking about. It's good to see you again and good to be able to talk to you again, and thank you for entertaining and having a conversation with me as well, too. Is there a place where people can find any of your links?
Yeah, Joe Green JFK is the main website, and from there you can get to everything else that I'm involved with.
Awesome. Glad you're doing all right as well too. And did you think did you hear any of that stuff, like the Richard Helms stuff? Is that new to you?
No, I've heard the Richard Helms before for sure. A couple of those I hadn't heard. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, at least I'm keeping it kind of interesting. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blanket. Stay tuned for our next episode.